Scientists and politicians are extremely concerned about the possibility that an asteroid or even a comet will hit the Earth in the near future. Even major motion pictures such as Deep Impact are preparing the public for this possible eventuality, and the government has even created a national near-Earth object defense strategy kind of modeled around the movie ideas. The real question, however, is does the Bible predict an asteroid or comet hitting the Earth? That's what we're talking about today, and we're starting right now. Most of us are familiar with Nebuchadnezzar's dream of a metal statue, which represents the kingdoms of man as 5 successive layers. Some of us may realize this statue is destroyed by a stone. You continued looking until a stone was cut out without hands, and it struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and crushed them. Now there's no doubt that symbolically the stone is Jesus, and the kingdom that grows out from this stone is the kingdom of God. But why did the Lord give Nebuchadnezzar a dream of a rock striking and pulverizing the statue? Looking at the art that has been created about this event, nearly every creator has pictured this as a meteor flying in to destroy the statue in the end times. Does an asteroid accompany Jesus upon his return to physically do what Jesus does spiritually, to crush the kingdoms of mankind? That's a question we're going to answer today. But let's start by looking at the past, because it will teach us about what that future might look like. Asteroid impacts are world-shaking events. And evidence of major asteroid or comet impacts in the distant past are scattered all over the planet. The biggest may be the Verdafort Dome in South Africa, which is like 150 miles across. Scientists estimate it was created by a rock that could have been 5 miles in diameter. The Chicxulub crater in the Yucatan is the most famous cataclysm ever. Secular scientists claim it is the meteor that snuffed out the dinosaurs, along with 3/4 of all life on Earth. Its crater is nearly 100 miles wide and 12 miles deep. Although it likely didn't kill the dinosaurs, an asteroid or a comet impact of that proportion would have devastating impact on the planet. It would be an extinction event for many species. In modern times, in 1908, over the Tunuska River in central Siberia, an explosion flattened 100 miles of trees. A bright flash of light was visible as far away as London. So the prevailing theory is massive space rock caused the blast. In 2013, a fireball traveling at 40,000 miles an hour exploded over Chelyabinsk, a city in southwest Russia, and it was caught on film by numerous people. The space rock exploded about 18 miles above the Earth, but the shock wave damaged 7,200 buildings, caused $30 million in damage, and injured 1,500. And this was only a very small meteor in comparison to the others we spoke of. It was maybe 60 feet in diameter. Particularly strange in this instance was that astronomers were expecting a very large meteor called 2012 DA14 to pass close to the Earth on that very day. About 16 hours before it did, the Chelyabinsk rock came down. This is something to consider. We have very little experience with major meteor impacts. Do large asteroids travel with numerous smaller ones in tow? Almost kind of like a mini solar system of their own. This impact seems to imply that they just might. And that has biblical implications, as we'll see as we continue to work through the video. Are there any recorded asteroid impacts in the Old Testament? There are some who believe that God accomplished the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah by a meteor or a comet. Drilling at the sites in the Middle East reveals meteorite remnants buried around 2000 BC, the approximate timing of Sodom and Gomorrah. A sulfur-containing rock would be superheated passing through the atmosphere and could have exploded, just like the Chelyabinsk fireball, producing the kind of fire and brimstone and superheat the destructions of the city around the Dead Sea experienced. Heat as intense as the surface of the sun. The region around the Dead Sea contains elemental sulfur as found nowhere else on Earth, and platinum spheres. And these are found all over the region too. This lends credence to this idea. The burning of these materials in combination can produce incredible temperatures. This also is highly biblically relevant, as a similar space rock could account for some of the judgments coming in the end times. And we're going to get to them in a minute. But first, let's discuss the impacts a major asteroid or comet might have on the Earth. We can then compare these impacts to the judgments occurring upon the day of the Lord as recorded in Revelation. Now, Revelation 8 and 9 indicates that a third of the Earth is impacted by the events on the day of the Lord and the trumpet judgments. This then should give us kind of an estimate of the size of the asteroid that might impact the Earth. A house-sized asteroid would have the explosive power of the Hiroshima atomic bomb. An asteroid the size of a skyscraper would wipe out a city the size of Paris. A football field-sized asteroid would cause an earthquake for 1,000 miles. But a half a mile wide asteroid would vaporize my home state of North Carolina in a second and result in dust clouds that would darken the whole world and cause a nuclear winter, maybe for several years. So a half mile in diameter asteroid, up to maybe one the size of Mount Everest, are the kind needed to have serious worldwide impacts. Now, comets have less solid material, but they could cause toxic gases. Now, those are not necessarily the kinds of things we see in the biblical text, so a comet is less likely. We should keep that in mind, and at the end of the video, we're going to search for known asteroids in the next 10 to 20 years that could match the type of destruction that we're looking for. Ones that could be a widowmaker. Now, a lot of research has been done on the destruction and the order of events of just this type of large asteroid, because this is the approximate estimated size of a Chicxulub impact in the Yucatan Peninsula. With its supposed association with the dinosaurs, this crater has received lots of attention. The impact power of this asteroid was likely 1 billion times the power of the Hiroshima bomb, or more powerful than all human atomic devices if they were set off at one time, in one place. Instant vaporization of everything within hundreds of miles of the impact site took place immediately, and it was followed by a 10.1 on the Richter scale earthquake. The earthquake triggered volcanic eruptions over most of the Earth. The initial impact also blew water, meteorite, and bedrock miles into the air, which started raining back down within the first 10 minutes as a strange ice and fireball mix, igniting wildfires over the entire continent. In my home state of North Carolina, we have something known as the Carolina Bays, which are 500,000 shallow wetland depressions, and they range in size from less than an acre to thousands of acres. We actually have one a couple hundred feet from my house. It's been proposed these circular depressions are the result of a comet impact that happened in the Great Lakes a couple 10,000 years ago. And the Great Lakes are hundreds of miles away from my home. Imagine that times 1,000 over an entire continent with an asteroid impact. And within an hour of impact, 600 to 1,000 mile-an-hour winds would ravage the impact area. If anything was left standing, it wouldn't after that. Next, a mega tsunami would form. Some estimate that it could have been as high as 1,000 feet high, and it would reach the coasts of most of the known world, wiping out life for miles inland. The ash from the impact would fill the skies of the entire continent of the explosion. One consequence of the ash was acid rain filled with chemicals that would poison most of the freshwater supplies. A second consequence that's not well understood is something known as spheroids. When the explosion happened, a great deal of rock and metal from the bedrock was liquefied and then thrown up into the air. These would form tiny crystals high in the atmosphere all around the Earth. When gravity began to make them fall, the friction of the atmosphere would heat them to burning hot. It would be the equivalent of 1 trillion tiny meteorites falling, which of course set another series of wildfires. A third consequence of the ash is it would envelop the continent of the impact in total darkness and shroud the rest of the Earth in a twilight-like haze that would plunge it into a nuclear winter, one that would last probably for a year. The combination of darkness and the cold would restrict most plant life on the planet. Immediately after that, the climate would flip due to a true global warming event as the gases released from the forest fires raging on much of the Earth. Billions of tons of carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and methane would be released into the air. A year-long winter would be followed by a year-long blazing hot summer. So if we analyze the events, we would have an earthquake, fireballs and ice, forest fires, tsunami, poisoned water, darkness, and winter followed by a blazing heat the next year. So let's see what the biblical record has to say about these exact things. Now, as we look at the prophecies in the Bible, certainly all the things recorded there can be the direct result of the hand of God. And that is certainly possible, if not the likely way those things might take place. But it is also possible that God could use a portion of his creation, an asteroid, to accomplish his will. And wait till you see how well the biblical record fits with an asteroid impact. And we should never forget that another part of the miraculous nature of all of this is that God wrote it in advance. Only God can tell the future with that sort of precision. So it is not outside the realm of God's sovereignty to use an asteroid. Now, the most likely portion of Scripture that would describe an asteroid strike is the trumpet judgments found in Revelation 8 and 9. So let's look at the passage. The angel took the censer and filled it with the fire of the altar and threw it to the earth. And there followed peals of thunder, and sounds and flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Prior to the trumpet judgments, the beginning of what we term the wrath of God, this unusual event takes place. An angel throws a fiery censer or fireball onto the earth. Now, this could be completely spiritual, without any events on the earth, or it could be an asteroid. It's possible. And the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound them. The first sounded, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and they were thrown to the earth, and 1/3 of the earth was burned up, and 1/3 of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. Notice, these things were thrown on the earth, just like the censer. After an asteroid impact on the coast, water, meteor, and bedrock was hurled into the air and fell back down as ice and a fireball mixture, igniting wildfires over the area of an entire continent. Sounds a lot like the first trumpet. The second angel sounded, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood, and a third of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. Again, notice the burning mountain is thrown, and a burning mountain crashing into the sea certainly sounds like a second asteroid, perhaps one traveling with the initial impactor, or perhaps all the trumpets are just the impacts of a single asteroid on different things, land, sea, etc. The third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers, and on the springs of water. The name of the star is called Wormwood, and a third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the waters because they were made bitter. There is the poisoned fresh water that is the same as we would have in an asteroid impact. And notice, it's linked to a star falling from the sky. The fourth angel sounded, and a third of the sun, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars were struck, so that a third of them would be darkened, and the day would not shine for a third of it, and the night in the same way. The fourth trumpet fits this theory perfectly as well. A darkening of the skies by a third seems to fit the effect of ash being thrown into the sky and creating that haze that would eventually lead to a nuclear winter. Then the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star from heaven which had fallen to the earth, and the key of the bottomless pit was given to him. He opened the bottomless pit, and smoke went up out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by the smoke of the pit. Wow, if that doesn't sound like an asteroid impact, I don't know what does. All these stars falling lend credence to that second idea that it's one star or one asteroid with multiple impacts. However, look at what follows. Then out of the smoke came locusts upon the earth, and power was given to them as scorpions of the earth have power. They were told not to hurt the grass of the earth, nor any green thing, nor any tree, but only the men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. Although these locusts seem to be entirely supernatural, the star that fell to the earth caused the opening of the bottomless pit. Now, could this be the cracking of the earth's crust by the impact? Well, it's certainly possible. Then a sixth angel sounded. A third of mankind was killed by these three plagues, by the fire, and the smoke, and the brimstone which proceeded out of their mouths. Finally, the sixth trumpet is the falling of fire and brimstone. Could this be associated with the spheroids that we spoke of earlier? Well, it's possible. The spheroids falling back to the earth is a latter event. But what about that mega tsunami? The Bible covers that as well. There will be signs in the sun and moon and stars, and on the earth dismay among nations, in perplexity at the roaring of the sea and the waves. And then during the bowl judgments we read this: the fourth angel poured out his bowl upon the sun, and it was given to it to scorch men with fire. Men were scorched with fierce heat. This scorching by the sun happens approximately a year in the Bible after the initial trumpet judgments. Again, the timing matches the asteroid impact model, very similar to what happened when one struck the Yucatan. So there is more than a reasonable chance that the prophecy of the trumpet judgments are describing an asteroid impact. All those events in approximately the right order. Knowing this, what asteroids have a reasonable chance of hitting the Earth in the next 20 years? It's something we should know. There are two in 2020, one on November 1st, one on December 1st. There is one on April 14th, 2026, and the granddaddy of them all, Apophis, a 1,200-foot wide asteroid scheduled to pass by on April 13th, 2029. So let's take a look at all of them. But two asteroids in 2020 are smaller, less than 15 yards in diameter each. Dangerous on a local level, but not on a worldwide impact basis. The 2026 asteroid is double their size, but it still wouldn't be bigger than a house. But the Apophis asteroid of 2029 is much more troubling, named after the Egyptian god of evil and destruction. It is famously the asteroid that self-proclaimed seer Thomas Horn believes he was told will hit the Earth on the Hebrew date of the 28th of Nisan of that year. Apophis will also make a close flyby of the Earth in 2036. Here it could collide with a planet, and also on the same day, April 13th of that year. In that year, it's the Hebrew date of Nisan 16, 2 days after Passover. Now, although scientists tell us the asteroid will miss the Earth by about 15,000 miles, there is speculation regarding the asteroid potentially hitting the Earth based on gravitational forces in space. Many scientists believe that the gravitational pull of nearby planets could nudge Apophis into a direct collision with the Earth. 15,000 miles is nothing in terms of interstellar space. It's also possible that Apophis could be gently nudged by another smaller asteroid, sort of like the game Asteroids was popular, in the 1980s, and slam right into the Earth. The seer Thomas Horn claims that inside contacts he has within the U.S. government claim they are predicting an Apophis impact, but they're covering it up to avoid scaring the public. Now, I have no way to confirm this one way or the other, but I thought I would at least let you know what he said about that. What should you do to prepare? What an interesting question. Personally, I say nothing but be aware of it. If the trumpet judgments truly are an asteroid impact, this asteroid impact, Christians will not be on the planet. The rapture happens after the sixth seal and before the seventh, prior to any trumpet judgments. The trumpet judgments are the wrath of God. And Christians avoid the wrath of God. In fact, the Holy Spirit has placed 5 eyewitnesses within the book of Revelation to tell us exactly when that wrath begins. If you want to keep watching, well, click right here and learn the exact timing of the start of the wrath of God. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.